Good morning, everybody. This week we're going to talk about the book Adulthood, Rites by Octavia E. Butler. It's the sequel to Dawn. It's the second book in the xenogenesis trilogy. And I haven't really thought of anything, I haven't really planned ahead what I'm going to say. I'm just going to sort of talk off the top of my head. We're not going to go into the themes of this until next week when I finish the trilogy. I might give some guesses as to what the themes are, but we're not going to get too deep into it yet. But anyway, in the first book, we were introduced to the character of Lilith and the fact that there was an alien race called the Oankali that came to Earth after the Earth had a major war that left most people dead. And, in the first book, we find out that the Oankali had cleaned up the Earth, kept the last living human beings alive in suspended animation for about 250 years, cleaned up the Earth, and then we're bringing humans back to the Earth. The only thing that the Oankali asked in return was that there was a trade of genetics. And basically, what that meant is that humans were no longer allowed to breed in the traditional sense of the word the way humans do it. They had to breed in the way that the Oankali do it, which is basically a human pairing, an Oankali pairing, and then in the middle there's what's called an Uloi that kind of works as like the middleman for mixing the genetics. And that all future kids born by the Oankali will become a little bit more human, and all human born children would become a little bit more Oankali until the two races merge together. So in the second book, we pick up a little bit after the humans have been returned to Earth, and Lilith is living in a town called Low, which is a Oankali construct town, which is basically a baby spaceship because the Oankali spaceships are alive. It's growing. It's still in what's considered its larval stage, and it's basically slowly maturing. It'll take hundreds of years for it to mature. There are several of these on the planet. And so you can kind of see where that's going because once these ships mature, they'll leave the planet and Earth will become basically a wasteland. So, you know, basically, humanity is doomed either way, and they're not, and whether they decided to join with the Oankali to be with their children or not. Because of this, there are two sets of humans on the planet. One set is basically following Lilith, and they've accepted that they're going to allow their children to become more like the Oankali, which is a truly, to humanize the Oankali are totally repulsive. They have what looks like earthworms growing out of them everywhere, which is their sensory tentacles, and they don't really like it. The other groups is the resistor groups. They've set up their own towns, and they don't allow Oankali into their towns. The problem being that no human can conceive a child without the Oankali help. So the resistor camps tend to raid the so-called trader camps in order to grab their children. Into this, the first male, that's called a construct, which is a child born of both Oankali and humans. The first male version of that is born on Earth. His name is Akin. He looks mostly human because all these constructs tend to look relatively human until the age of metamorphosis, they where they become what they're going to become. And usually that's also the time when their sexual organs grow in. They chew their bodies are asexual until the time of metamorphosis, at which point they become male or female. Um, they basically, Akeem looks very human. He looks like a very young, a very like an 18-month-old baby human boy. His only difference, really, to most people's eyes, is the fact that his tongue looks like a slug that he uses for his sensory organ. One day, a man comes from a town called Phoenix, which is one of the resistor towns, and he sort of decides to stay in Low because he falls in love with Lilith, and he becomes a father figure to Akeem. Basically he's teaching him how to be a young. He's teaching him how to be a young boy, although it's not really, Akeem isn't a young boy yet, but he's going to become one when he reaches the age of metamorphosis. One day, while they're out, Akeem and Tino, the man, are out gathering food. A resistor group comes in and grabs Akeem and very heavily, injures Tino. At that point, the story switches from focusing on Lilith to focusing on Akeem. Akeem is taken by this resistor group and sold to a couple, actually, back in Phoenix, in the town of Phoenix. And then you experience the rest of the book from Akeem's point of view. Akeem is very worried because while he is at first very scared of the group that kidnaps him, he grows to realize that they're not totally evil. They're very coarse. They do treat him badly, but they're not bad people. They're just don't know how to treat a young baby. And also, they don't really know how to treat a young baby that is at the developmental stage of almost a 20-year old, because constructs remember everything. They're able to talk almost immediately upon birth. They're capable of understanding things at a much higher level than humans are. So Akeem is sold to a couple in Phoenix, where he's brought up for probably at least 2 years in Phoenix. He comes to understand this resistor village. He learns about the fact that the main thing with resistors is they don't want to have children in the way that the Oankali want to force upon humans. He also knows that humans can't be allowed to breed on Earth because Earth has a time limit. When the ships mature, they will leave behind a blasted rock about on the same level as the moon. And he doesn't tell them that because, obviously, if you're a construct that the resistors hate already, you're not going to blab that out. Then, at one point, after about 2 years, he's rescued by the Oankali, and he's brought back to Low. He starts to go through his metamorphosis to become, a full adult Oankali human construct. They take him to the main spaceship that they have, and I'm never going to try and pronounce that name. And where he meets an Uloi that mentors him and tries to explain to him that it knows humans. If humans are allowed to breed, they'll make the same mistakes that they did before, because according to the Oankali, humans have a dangerous combination. We're both very intelligent, but we're also very hierarchical. And what that means is that we will act in violence towards one another and towards the environment over time. And It says, look, we can't possibly allow humans to just breed the normal way, especially because even if they learned not to be so hierarchical and put that intelligence to serve to in service of a more horizontal power structure, they still are going to all die because they're not going to be because they're not going to be able to live on Earth for very long. It's only going to be another maybe 200 years before the Earth is just a blasted wasteland. So what a king comes up with is he argues to the rest of the Oankali that Mars could be terraformed and given to humanity and allow them to start breeding in the normal way if they choose to. The Oankali agree with this. They agree to start, terraforming Mars and moving resistors that want to go back to breeding the normal way to Mars and giving them the ability to breed. It's understood among the Oankali that this is a mistake because humanity is simply going to destroy itself again. It's going to make the same mistakes it did before, but they feel it's okay to let them do it, even though it's totally against the Oankali method, because they feel that they're harming the human race by allowing them to make these same mistakes and kill themselves again. So that's basically the plot. If I had to say anything, I would say where the first book really started to dig into the question of what it meant to be human. The second book kind of digs into the question of free will and making one's own choices. That's just a very light idea of where I see the themes of this trilogy going, and I can't wait to find out where it ends. But that's the review of this book. I really enjoyed it. I will say I didn't enjoy it quite as much as Dawn, and I think that was just because the viewpoint character was a bit removed from human thought processes. Just because Akin is not a human being, he's a Oankali human construct. But it's well worth reading. It gives you a lot to think about. It puts that little factoid of the Oankali's actions are going to lead to the end of Earth sooner or later. But it also demonstrates that the Oankali are willing to try and help humans to have their own civilization again on Mars, even though they know it's going to be a mistake. So the question is, can humans breed out of ourselves this hierarchical notion and that always lead to violence? We'll find out, I guess. But anyway, have a great day. I'll see you again next week. Bye bye.